What's up, everybody? I am Logan Burchett, co-founder, chief operating officer of Forecaster here. Hope everybody's having a great day so far. It is a beautiful day here in Louisville, Kentucky, so I'll be shooting this one outside, and I'm very excited to be talking about the 5 Series A metrics that you need to focus on to have a successful fundraise. Now, all of us that have fundraised before, we know you got to know your metrics. Whenever you're going to be talking to investors, you need to understand what they're going to be looking for, right? What are the metrics that they're going to want to dig into? What are the metrics that they're going to want to understand? And what are the metrics that they are going to find really, really important for them to feel comfortable in writing you a check? So today, we're going to focus on 5 of what we believe are the most important metrics to focus on so that you can look at these metrics for your own business, understand where you are and where you need to focus on in order to set yourself up to have that successful Series A fundraise, which of course is an amazing milestone for any startup to achieve. And I'm happy to say that that is a milestone that we at Forecaster are going to be chasing down in the not so distant future. So hopefully this content is valuable for you and interesting. And if so, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. It's really, really helpful, helps us grow, helps us get the good word out there when it comes to financial modeling and forecasting. Without further ado though, we're gonna go ahead and jump right into the content. Okay, so the first metric that we're gonna be focusing on in this video is run rate total revenue. What is a run rate? So what a run rate is it's essentially trying to give you on a month-to-month basis what your annualized revenue is gonna be. So if you're a startup, hopefully you're growing quite a lot month over month. So your monthly reoccurring revenue, or MRR, this month is hopefully a lot larger than the MRR that you had last month. And as that trajectory continues, you're gonna look a lot different today than you did, let's say, 6 months ago. So because startups grow so rapidly whenever you compare them to larger companies, a lot of times investors are gonna wanna understand what your annualized monthly reoccurring revenue is. So to do this, it's actually very simple. You're going to take what your monthly reoccurring revenue is at this point in time, so at the end of this month or last month or any month for that matter, and you're just going to multiply that by 12 in order to annualize it. So if you do it this way, then you're going to be able to see at any point in time what your theorized annual reoccurring revenue is. So if you stopped selling today and you quit growing, then what can you expect to collect every single year? And it's important to note that this is annual reoccurring revenue, right? So this only works if you're looking at that reoccurring revenue that somebody's gonna have to opt out of for you to stop collecting it. This isn't applicable for e-commerce businesses or transactional businesses because that's not reoccurring. So this is really only applicable for SaaS businesses. So metric number 2 is going to be the revenue growth. So you calculate revenue growth by looking at the current period revenue, subtracting the previous period revenue, divided by the previous period revenue, multiply it by 12. So it's essentially just a percentage growth from one month or quarter or year to the next. Now, I say month, quarter, year because revenue growth can be categorized into any of those buckets. So I can look at how much my revenue grew from 1 month over the next month over the next month. I could also do quarter over quarter growth. I could also do year over year growth. But the key there is you have to compare apples to apples. So if you're going to be looking at, this period, which is this quarter, you're going to want to compare it to last period, which is last quarter. And then that's going to get you your growth rate from quarter over quarter. Same deal with year over year, same deal with month over month. But as a startup, investors are going to be very, very interested in digging into how much you're growing because that's going to give them a sense of the trajectory of your business. And if you're a startup and you're growing a lot, you're going to want to keep growing a lot. So investors are going to use that momentum to understand how much of that they can expect to persist going forwards. They're going to want to see a steep growth curve and plenty of upside from you, which is why metric number 2, revenue growth, is so important. All right, so metric number 3 is a very important one, gross margin percentage. Now, gross margin is your total revenue for a given period of time minus your cost of goods sold, which I'll explain in a second, divided by your total revenue multiplied by 100. Now, what is cost of goods sold? Cost of goods sold are the costs associated with your business that scale directly with revenue. So the most popular example that I can give for this is the classic lemonade stand example. So if I open up a lemonade, if I want to sell another glass of lemonade, I need to go buy more lemons, I need to buy more sugar, I need to buy more ice in order to make the lemonade. I don't, however, have to spend more on my rent for the lemonade stand. So that percentage of costs that vary, that actually I'm going to have to spend more money on to deliver the good or service, those are what are categorized as costs of goods sold, or COGS. You may have heard it referred to as COGS. The reason that gross margin percentage is so powerful and so important is because it gives an investor and you an insight as to how scalable your business is. So if I sell $1 of revenue, but then I have 80 cents in costs that go along with that revenue, at the end of the day, I'm only going to collect 20 cents on whatever it is that I sell. So that doesn't seem like a very good business, right? But on the flip side of that, if I sell $1 of revenue and only have 20 cents of costs associated with that, then I'm going to collect 80 cents for every dollar that I sell. That seems to be like a much better business model. So investors really want to see high gross margin percentages. Those are going to signal a more positive outcome for your business, and that's probably going to give you a higher valuation and a better outcome from an investor standpoint. So if you're a SaaS business, one of the reasons that SaaS businesses are so attractive is they have high gross margins, 70+% typically for most SaaS companies. So gross margin, very, very important metric. Definitely going to want to understand that. So the fourth metric that we're going to be talking about is the LTV to CAC ratio. Now, LTV stands for lifetime value. So essentially, what is the value of a customer over their entire lifetime? CAC is what's known as customer acquisition cost. So how much does it cost on average for you to acquire a customer? So for example, if I have a customer that pays me $10 a month and I have an average churn rate of 5%, so churn rate being percentage of people that leave me every single month, then that means that I have a lifetime value of $200. The way that I can do that is I can just take the $10 that they spend every month with me, I can divide that by their churn rate, and then that's going to equal that $200. That means that on average, they'll stick with me long enough to pay me $200 in aggregate. Compare that to the customer acquisition cost. So how much money does it cost for me to actually obtain that customer? So you can think about that by saying, how much am I spending on marketing for a given time period, call it month or quarter, and then divide that by how many customers I got within that same time period, month or quarter. That's going to average out to see how much on average it costs me to acquire that customer. The LTV divided by the CAC is a ratio of lifetime value to how much it costs to actually get that customer. And ideally, you want that ratio to be as large as humanly possible. So an LTV to CAC ratio of 3 or greater is really, really great. That means that my lifetime value is 3 times more than what it costs for me to actually acquire that customer. So ideally, you want a really, really high LTV to CAC ratio. So the last metric that we're going to be focusing on is gross churn. So gross churn is the canceled MRR plus downgraded MRR divided by the MRR at the end of the previous month, multiplied by 100. Now, what that's telling you is generally the percent of lost revenue due to clients canceling or downgrading. So why is this important? Well, it's important because churn is a very important gauge to understand the stickiness of your offering. So typically, if a company has a very, very high churn rate, investors are going to look at that and they're going to see a lack of product market fit. So if you have a very low churn rate, it's going to show very high product market fit, which is going to be very impressive, very important for an investor. So you're going to want to make sure to understand what is your growth churn. And if it's very, very high, you're going to want to spend a lot of time and energy bringing that down so that you'll be able to more successfully pull off that Series A. And the extra credit metric for this video, we're going to talk about net revenue retention. So the net revenue retention is going to be the MRR at the start of the month plus any expansions or upsells minus churn or cancellations divided by the MRR at the start of the month. That's a big formula, but generally what that means is how much revenue is the same cohort of companies paying me from one time period to the next. So for example, you might have a positive net revenue retention rate if I've got 100 companies, for example, that were my clients last year. Let's say that 50% of them left, so I'm down to 50 companies out of 100, but those 50 that remain pay me twice as much, or perhaps even 3 times as much. So if they pay me twice as much, then I'm going to have flat net revenue retention because I lost half of my companies, but the ones that stayed paid twice as much to make up the difference in revenue. So I'll be flat on net revenue retention, even though my churn rate is going to be really high. That's going to be 50% annually. I can have positive net revenue retention if those remaining cohort, the 50 companies, are going to pay me 3 times what they paid last year. That's because even though I have half the client base that remain is going to pay me significantly more money, which is going to mean that my revenue that comes from that client base is going to actually be greater in the next period than it was in the last period. So if you have positive net revenue retention, that's going to be a huge plus for investors. So you're going to want to make sure to set your business up in such a way that you are ripe for net revenue retention. You can do this by setting up expansion packages and having pricing increase over time. So there you have it, y'all. Those are the 5 Series A metrics to focus on for fundraising success. Hopefully this was interesting and helpful to y'all. Again, please hit subscribe, smash the thumbs up button. We really, really appreciate it. Really helps us grow, and we'll see you in the next video.